The arrival of the elegant lady brought a new tension to the mansion. Her name was Lady Margaret, a distant cousin of Sinclair known for her sharp intelligence and commanding presence. She settled into the mansion with the declared intention of helping set things in order. From the start, Lady Margaret seemed suspicious of Elizabeth, watching her with a critical gaze that made her feel constantly under scrutiny. With Lady Margaret's presence, the atmosphere in the mansion became more formal and constrained. Sinclair appeared torn between his responsibilities towards his cousin and his growing emotions for Elizabeth. Stolen moments between them became rare, and the tension between the two grew with each passing day. Amidst this, a new figure entered the scene, further complicating the situation. During a formal dinner, Lady Margaret introduced a special guest, Lord Robert Whitmore, a man of impeccable appearance and refined manners. Robert was a longtime family friend who seemed particularly interested in Elizabeth from the moment they met. His eyes gleamed with a curiosity and intensity that unsettled her. In the following days, Robert frequented the mansion regularly, always finding ways to be near Elizabeth. He was charming and attentive, making her feel valued and admired. Despite this, Elizabeth couldn't shake her confused feelings for Sinclair, who now seemed more distant than ever. One afternoon, while Elizabeth was in the garden with the children, Robert appeared with a warm smile. "Miss Elizabeth, how about a stroll?" he suggested, offering her his arm. Feeling torn between formality and curiosity, she accepted the invitation. They walked through the gardens, conversing about trivial matters until Robert, with a serious look, asked, "Elizabeth, there's something I need to know. What really goes on between you and Sinclair?" Elizabeth was taken aback by the direct question. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lord Whitmore. I'm just his children's nanny." Robert chuckled softly, but his eyes were serious. "Don't underestimate my perception, Elizabeth. Sinclair and you have a connection that goes beyond a simple employer and employee." Before she could respond, Sinclair appeared in the distance, observing the scene with an indecipherable expression. He approached slowly, interrupting their conversation. "Lord Whitmore, we need to discuss preparations for tomorrow's party. Elizabeth, could you excuse us?" Elizabeth nodded, feeling like a pawn in a game she barely understood. As she returned indoors, she overheard fragments of the conversation between the two men, words laden with tension and implications. Her mind raced with unanswered questions, and Robert's presence only further complicated her feelings. The next morning, as the mansion prepared for the party, Elizabeth couldn't shake off her unease. Lady Margaret, noticing her distraction, offered unexpected advice. "Elizabeth, dear, sometimes the heart leads us to dangerous places. Be cautious whom you trust." The party began with a splendor that felt almost surreal. Music, laughter, and conversation filled the air, but Elizabeth felt lost amidst the crowd. Robert, ever present, tried to ease her tension with light conversation and compliments. However, his eyes constantly searched for Sinclair, who seemed to avoid her gaze. Midway through the party, Robert invited Elizabeth to dance. Reluctantly, she accepted, trying to ignore Sinclair's intense gaze from across the hall. As they danced, Robert pulled her closer, whispering, "I can't deny how much you intrigue me, Elizabeth. Sinclair is a complicated man, but I am straightforward in my feelings for you." Robert's words stirred her, but before she could respond, Sinclair interrupted the dance. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice gentle yet firm. Elizabeth felt like a rope pulled between two worlds, unsure where to go. As they danced, Sinclair gently pulled her closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "We need to talk, but not here," he whispered. "There are things you need to know, but it's dangerous to speak of them here. Come with me." He led her with a gentle force, guiding her out of the hall, through dark corridors, and finally into a small study. Elizabeth's heart raced, unsure of what to expect. Sinclair closed the door behind them, creating a bubble of privacy amidst the chaos of the party. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice laden with restrained emotion. "I'm sorry for all the confusion and what you've been through. There are things at stake that you can't imagine. My decision to disguise myself as the gardener was to protect you and the children, to maintain appearances while I investigate threats to our safety." Elizabeth was silent, processing his words. "But why didn't you tell me sooner? Why all this charade?" Sinclair sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because the less you knew, the safer you would be. But now, with Robert here and Lady Margaret getting involved, things are getting complicated. We need to be careful." Before they could continue, the study door swung open abruptly, revealing Robert. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, his gaze shifting from Sinclair to Elizabeth with an intensity that made the air feel thicker. "Robert," Sinclair said, his voice cool. "Elizabeth and I were discussing important matters. This isn't the time for intrusions." Robert took a step forward, his gaze challenging. "Perhaps it's exactly the time. Elizabeth deserves to know the truth, the whole truth, Sinclair." Elizabeth, caught between the two men, felt like a pawn in a game of power and secrets. What did it all mean? What secrets still lurked within the Sinclair mansion? And why was Robert so determined to get involved? As tension mounted, the distant sound of laughter and music from the party seemed like a world apart. Elizabeth knew she was about to uncover something that would change everything, but what would it be? And how would she handle the truths about to be revealed? The plot was growing more intricate, and Elizabeth felt she was only beginning to unravel the dark secrets surrounding Sinclair and his family. The silence among the three was broken only by the distant sound of the party, echoing through the mansion walls. Feeling cornered and confused, Elizabeth took a step back, trying to process the revelations that Sinclair and Robert seemed on the brink of making. "I think I deserve to know the truth," she finally said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions within her. "No more secrets." Sinclair nodded slowly, his expression grave. "Elizabeth, I didn't want to involve you in this, but you have the right to know. There's something dark in our family, something that forced me to take extreme measures." Robert, still standing by the door, crossed his arms. "The Sinclair family history is full of intrigue and betrayal, Elizabeth. Sinclair's disguise as the gardener was an attempt to investigate without drawing attention. But it's not just that. There are people within the family and outside it who want to see Sinclair fail, and that puts everyone around him in danger." Elizabeth felt a wave of fear and anger. "And why keep me in the dark? I could have helped." Sinclair took a step towards her, but Robert was quicker, taking her hand. "I told you, Elizabeth. You deserve someone who doesn't play games with your life." She pulled her hand back, looking at both men with determination. "I'm not a pawn in your game. I just want to do my job and take care of the children." Sinclair sighed deeply. "I know, and I'm sorry for putting you in this position. But now that Robert is involved, things have changed. He's not just an old friend. He's here to ensure I follow the family's rules, and that includes protecting you." Elizabeth felt the weight of Sinclair's words, and despite her anger, she also saw sincerity in his eyes. Before she could respond, a muffled sound caught the attention of all three. It was a cry coming from the hallway. "Stay here," Sinclair ordered, stepping out of the study with Robert close behind. Elizabeth, unable to stand still, followed them, her heart pounding. They raced down the hallway to the grand living room, where they found Lady Margaret standing, pale and trembling, pointing to the open window. "I saw someone," she said, her voice wavering. "A man." He was looking inside. Sinclair and Robert exchanged looks, the tension between them momentarily forgotten. "We need to check the perimeter," Robert said, already moving towards the door. Sinclair agreed, turning to Elizabeth. "Stay close to Lady Margaret. Don't leave her side." Elizabeth nodded, feeling helpless as the two men left. Lady Margaret was still trembling, and Elizabeth guided her to a sofa, trying to calm her. "It's all right. Sinclair and Robert will take care of this." Lady Margaret looked at her with wide eyes. "Do you really trust them, Elizabeth? This house is full of secrets, and some of them are more dangerous than you imagine." Those words lingered in Elizabeth's mind as she tried to comfort Lady Margaret. What was really happening in that mansion? And how could she protect herself and the children amidst so many secrets? Hours later, Sinclair and Robert returned, their faces grim. "We didn't find anyone," Sinclair said, frustration evident in his voice. "But we need to increase security." Robert agreed, but there was renewed tension between the two men. "Elizabeth," he said softly, "perhaps you should consider leaving this house. I can ensure your safety." Elizabeth looked at him, then at Sinclair, feeling torn. I need to think about it." Sinclair stepped forward, his expression gentle. "Elizabeth, I know this is scary, but trust me. I just want to protect you." Robert didn't back down, his gaze fixed on Elizabeth. "And I do too. But you need to decide what's best for you." The decision weighed on her mind as she climbed the stairs to her room. Feeling exhausted, Elizabeth lay down on her bed, her heart heavy with uncertainties about the future. Sinclair's and Robert's words echoed in her mind, and she knew the choice she would make would change everything. But that night, her thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound at the door. It was a note slipped under the crack. She got up, opened the note, and read the words that made her heart stop. "Meet me in the greenhouse at midnight. S." Continued in the next episode.